welcome to another episode of Millennial Money Matters with Kelly Turner.
And Derek Mazzarella.
And who do we have here today, Derek?
We have a very special guest, Kim Conti.
Hi, Kim. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, guys. So my name is Kim Conti. I'm the founder of a toy rental startup called Orbit Crates. We rent toys to parents for kids ages 0 to 6, helping them reduce all of the clutter in their house, save some money, and keep those kids off of screens.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I think we were joking and we were actually having this discussion that the podcast recording is always actually the most fun part. We're making jokes.
Yeah.
And I know Kim because we have kids the same age and they go to the same school and our daughters are friends. But you two have known each other since you were kids.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah. Go way back. Yeah. We were like, oh, do you know this Kim Conti? I was like, I don't know Kim Conti. And then I was like, then I found out that was your, new name. And I was
New
like,
name.
oh,
Yeah.
New name.
Yeah.
Married name.
that's what they say, new name.
So yeah, I'm excited to talk about kid stuff. I'm excited to talk a little bit about kind of your journey. We've talked a lot in the podcast sort of about the side hustle or the like entrepreneurial idea. And I think that millennials tend to vibe with that. So I actually read a stat on Bankrate yesterday that 34% of millennials have something else other than their like full-time gig, and something crazy like 80% of them dream to turn that into something full-time. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about how you got there and sort of the inspiration from your own kids. As we talk about kids, as we walked in, we were discussing, as this airs next week, our kids are off school. Again,
They can listen to this on Monday, Tuesday.
Right. Put it on for them because the amount of days off school have been pretty impressive. All year. But you went to where when they were
Great Wolf Lodge. We did it over a weekend, so it was a Saturday, so it was absolutely mobbed. It was insane.
Was it the first time you've been there?
Yeah, I was so overwhelmed. It was ridiculous. I think my favorite part was the lazy river, quote unquote, which is like actually super fast. There's nothing lazy about it.
Dumps your kids off of it. Have you done Great Wolf Lodge with your kids yet?
I have not. I'll use this as a review.
Use it as a review. My review. Which one did you go to? That's my first.
The
question.
one in by Foxwoods.
By Foxwoods. So the brand new one. So it's
brand new
less gross than the other ones.
I imagine. Yeah, it was still crazy though.
I went to the one in the Poconos, and I literally, so fun fact about me, guys, if you don't know, while I do things like podcasts, I'm a total introvert and I don't like people, crowds, loud, anything like that.
So you got all three.
We literally walked in the door and it was like a stuffed animal band. What are they called? Like mascots, like playing music so loudly and 1,000 kids dancing. And I was like, oh God.
It's my nightmare.
And it smells like pizza and chlorine.
The chlorine is out of control. My skin was like kind of burning all day. And I feel like I smelled for 3 days afterwards.
So I describe it to people as a wet kids casino. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's designed so your children do not know what time it is. You have no idea what time it is. You have no idea how long you've been there. You have no idea how much money you've spent because every single thing in there is extra.
You can't get out either.
You cannot get out. Like, oh, we need the magic. Did you get suckered into the magic wand?
No, we didn't. No.
Magic wand is like $50.
I have a thing where I just don't tell kids or like things are like available, so they don't know, so they don't get mad at me.
They can't. Are you not at the like full blown reading everything stage?
Oh no, thank God. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. We are in the full blown. We can read everything, so we know. Paige was like, and of course had like interviewed friends. Like, what did you do while you were there? And she knew everything.
So my kids don't care about anyone else, so they don't ever ask any of the kids anything about their lives.
Oh, God.
So that helps. Although I think my favorite part about the trip though was, so we did this lazy river and it like bunches up because there's like way too many people there. And Harrison, who was wearing swim goggles, could see underwater theoretically, dives under and then pops up into the tube, but some girl was already in the tube. This girl's face was like out of control. Like, oh my God. He just like looked around like, what happened? And then he just went right out like nothing happened. I'm like,
oh my
to be
God.
this kid.
No, I would like my kids to have more fun things to do than that. And I think that's where you come in here. So Tell us a little bit about the inception of Orbit Crates. Like, where did it come from? The idea and how did you make the decision to make this a full-time gig?
Yeah, I mean, I think like all entrepreneurs and people who are just dreamers, I had always wanted to start something, and I'd always had a lot of different ideas my whole life, my whole career. But, the toy clutter is a real one if you're a parent. I have 3 kids. My oldest is 12. And I started thinking about this, more than a decade ago. I would go into people's homes and we'd all have the same exact toy that we all had to buy new, and we'd all have to get rid of it in 3 months. And I was just flabbergasted at the amount of consumption. I think, as a country, we've hit sort of peak consumption and peak on a lot of different fronts. And I was waiting for this change to happen, you know, the sharing economy with sharing our cars and sharing our homes, and really surprised to see that at this day and age, the only opportunity to give your kids toys, which I do think are important to keep them off screens, was to buy them brand new. It just felt like a crazy idea to me. So I started kind of piloting it as a side hustle, moonlighting gig with all the time I had outside of my day job. And I think that was really the first step. And in some ways, it was the hardest step, right? I boxed up a bunch of toys that my kids had, put an announcement out on a Facebook group, and asked if people wanted to start renting. And it was sort of that leap to be public about it and share kind of what I wanted to do. Lots of lessons learned about progress over perfection, for sure. And, you know, kind of started from there. But what I was finding is doing that as a side hustle and a parent became very difficult to focus on one thing or the other. So in December of 2024, I decided to give my notice. So I left my job in January 2025 to pursue this full time. Sometimes after some good advice. But, you know, just felt like I needed to focus and I needed to kind of go all in.
Well, so why don't you, for the people, why don't you tell us what your day job was?
Sure.
And like how demanding was it? Was it okay? Like time ways, like you got a full-time job and kids and you're trying to run a side hustle. What was that like?
Yeah, pretty demanding. So I was the chief product officer for a conversational voice AI company. We were building voice assistants for surgeons, and those surgeons were in the Middle East. So I was doing a lot of travel in the Middle East, across the country, running a team. It was pretty demanding, all consuming, all encompassing. It was also sort of like a startup. So we were, you know, full steam ahead every day. So, you know, even if I could carve out time on the weekends or in the evenings between travel and kids to do my company Orbit Crates, mentally, it was just very taxing. And I felt like I wasn't giving it all in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
Awesome. What would you say was there like a moment where you were like, all right, I got to quit. I got to quit my full-time job, or was it kind of just the accumulation?
Well, I think it was two things. Personally, I just think at this point in my career, I think we're all about the same age, millennials. I had felt like I had done every sort of job, right? I had worked in Fortune 50 companies. I had been in consulting. I had worked for another startup and felt like no time seems like the right time. Maybe I should have done it in my 20s, but I was focused on my career. Maybe I do it when the kids are out of the house, but, you know, life is going to pass you by and you sort of like just have to take the leap at some point. So I felt like there was this personal restlessness in me to go do it, and had to do it. I would say as a family, you know, I think it did take a little bit more planning than just like, okay, I'm ready to leave now.
Yeah, you're not your 20s. You just sit back and eat tuna fish every day. You're
Right.
like, hey, I'll cut costs.
Right.
You know, it's a little challenging.
Yeah. And the financial planning was definitely a large piece of that, which took a little bit more preparation, I think, than, you know, I'm out.
Yeah, right. You got to think about what kind of backup plan you have, all of that. Did you have a lot of support from friends and family, or was there a lot of people that were like, Kim, what are you doing?
Great question. I mean, my husband was a huge supporter. I think, you know, it's interesting from a risk-taking perspective, and I know you guys talk about this. I would say he's definitely more risk-adverse, more planful, a little more cautious. I tend to be, you know, on the other side of that. And so it makes for a good balance in the house. I think so. He was, of course, supportive of me and my dreams, but was worrying about, you know, providing for the family, thinking about planning for the future. So that was like the first and foremost. We had to get in alignment about what this looked like and feel like we were both really behind what the trade-offs would be for our family. I think family and friends, you know, have always been supportive of me and actually have been amazing through this journey. I think when you have the highs and lows as an entrepreneur, and always said you know, they believe in you, but I think, you know, it is sometimes a solo journey. It feels like a crazy journey. There's not tons of people who just quit at 40 and go do it and live that life every day. So, you know, I feel like I've got the emotional support, but sometimes it can be challenging for sure.
Yeah, I think anytime you have a career change in general. So I career changed at 30. And that is 10 years younger, which even then, and I did not have kids at that point, you know, you have people like, oh, yeah, I'm so happy for you, but are you sure? And you get the like, are you sure? And I think that are you sure is what holds a lot of people back from making the leap, is if they don't have supportive friends and family, if they don't have people who are like, we're here for you, you can do it, lean on us. You know, I think it can really stop people from making the big leap into whatever the side hustle is to be full time.
And I'll just say, no, I wasn't sure. And I don't think you're ever sure. You're never 100%. If it was guaranteed bet that we're all going to quit our jobs and make millions of dollars, like
we'd all do it.
We'd all do it. So I do think, for me, the risk was not doing it at that point. There was a lost opportunity cost to have never done it than to stay doing what I was doing.
So would you say it was more of like an emotional / like I need to do this personal decision versus a financial decision?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. It was probably antithetical to the financial planning. So we can talk. I'll ask you guys about that. Later on.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fine, because I think at the end of the day, like the numbers will typically work themselves out. Especially if you're like really passionate about something that you're doing. Generally, the money's going to follow that. Right. I've kind of always found that to be true. But I'm sure it must have been really stressful when you first started doing that.
When I first started, I think it was really invigorating, right? You have a full-time schedule to do everything you've ever dreamed of and thought of. And I think a lot of that was figuring out the right balance or cadence. I felt like I could never take an evening and weekend, a moment off, because I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do and have to figure everything out from scratch. Thankfully, by the second quarter of doing that, I kind of found the right rhythm and what made sense for the family. So I think it was just very exciting right away, which was great.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that people miss about kind of entrepreneurship, working for yourself, commission-based type work, anything like that, is people see the flexibility, and that is super attractive, but they don't understand that with flexibility comes responsibility. And yes, you can have all the flexibility in the world, but that doesn't mean you don't have to work. It doesn't mean that you're available 100% of the time. It doesn't mean that you're not making decisions every day over what portion of your business is the most important. What activity is making money? What activity is moving me forward? What activity is getting me visibility? And you have to balance these in such kind of fine minutia, or everything sort of falls apart. And how did you find sort of that piece? Because I think the flexibility piece is almost the Achilles heel of entrepreneurship. It's what do you do with all that flexibility?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, personally, it was a drive and a desire to do it around the clock, to solve these problems after the kids go to bed, and just want to be in it. And this was your dream. This is the opportunity, right? And to sort of embrace that. So that was the motivator to focus and to do the hard things, kind of nonstop. I would agree with you. I think, some people are like, oh, well, could your kids stay home from, you can skip out, and this actually has financial implications too, right? Like you are trying to keep living the life that you are living, maybe supporting your kids, making sure that they're in summer camp because you have a full-time job. Your job actually might be even more hours than you've ever worked in your life. Yeah. But now there is no paycheck there on the regular, right, to make that work. And so I think there still is a lot of constraint about how do you prioritize and keep the family going and prioritize what they need to do, but also be working more than ever and not take too much of advantage of the flexibility. For me, from a business front, it was milestones and it was objectives, month after month. It was, what are the goals that I want to achieve? How do I measure them? Am I hitting those goals? And so that one helped me focus my time away from the kids. But it also helped me prioritize my time on a day-to-day work and not get lost in things that didn't matter and weren't going to drive the business forward.
Love it.
Yeah, because I think I always get that, oh, you have flexibility. You must be able to take as much time off as you want. But like that is the exact opposite. Typically what happens, especially if you're like really driven in your business.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, cool, I can take the time off, but I don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
And people don't get that, like the I don't get paid for it is a double-edged sword, is that every minute that you are not in your business, working in your business, you're not getting paid right now, but you're also not getting paid 3 months from now, 6 months from now, because it's the accumulation of work. And I think that's people who work, and I'm not knocking the 9-to-5ers, I was a 9-to-5er forever, but people who are working that sort of 9-to-5 guaranteed salary, if you take your foot off the gas, that does not necessarily have implications 6 months down the line. With entrepreneurship, if you take your foot off the gas, that is going to show up somewhere else. And I think that that's really the pitfall of the flexibility.
Yeah,
People
and
don't
sometimes,
see that.
yeah, sometimes you can't even feel guilty about not working. You're like, oh, I feel like I should be doing something right now. If, even if it is a normal, like, hey, my kids are taking 2 days off of school, like I have to be
Next
there
week.
Like,
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, Kelly, great point. It completely changes the trajectory of the future of the business, right? And for me, I had given myself a certain capital runway. I knew how long, how much the business was burning every month, how long the business will survive. That's the startup game, right? Is can you achieve the next milestone to either meet your revenue goals or raise funding before the cash runs out? And that's real every day.
Every day. You've been, I think, very strategic from what I've watched. I've been watching Kim sort of build this business because you've been building it the whole time that I've known you. So kind of seeing it on social and seeing how it's changed is, I think you've been really strategic about where I think you've aligned yourself and like what organizations and kind of really putting yourself out there for funding and visibility. Can you tell us a little bit about those decisions? I know that you've been in some like contests, right, for like startups to receive funding, some grants and things like that. Because there's, I think, a vulnerability for people in that, right? Like, oh, I'm going to put myself out there. Not only am I running this business, but I'm going to ask people for help and ask people for assistance. What was that like?
Yeah. So I think the funding piece is so interesting and, grateful to say that I was able to, what they call an entrepreneurship, bootstrap a little bit of capital before I got started. But my husband and I had made some interesting financial decisions, which was we weren't going to take on additional debt to fund the business. We were going to try to keep business funding very separate, other than a couple small things that I do on the side. So this had to be a self-sustaining business in and of itself. I think that meant being really scrappy about funding and then, trying to win some money. There's all sorts of decisions and recommendations for startups. Do you end up taking capital? Do you raise a friends and family angel round? Do you go to VC and equity partners if your business is at that point, et cetera? There's lots of opportunities in our state for non-dilutive funding, which means you win the money. You have to use it toward the business, of course, but it doesn't dilute your equity in the company, which is pretty amazing. So that was something that I did do. I think my business advisor actually 4 weeks after I left my job said, "You got to go pitch at this competition." I said, "Wait, I'm still figuring out if I'm even doing this," I wasn't sure if I'd be ready. I had done pitches at my previous company, but kind of went in and grateful enough, had actually won that competition. And I think that gave me some of the confidence that I needed that, this thing has to go and it has to go in a big way. And you do have the vulnerability to put yourself out there. So spent about 6 months really raising non-dilutive capital to keep things going for the first year. That in and of itself is an interesting business trade-off decision, right? As you guys think about your business, where you spend your time, where you spend your money. We got some money, but then when you're raising this money, you're not necessarily running the business and thinking about the customers.
sales or that,
That's always the entrepreneurship challenge, right? Is the capital funding as well as reinvesting it back into the business.
So when you're looking at bringing your money in, like how are you prioritizing? Okay, this is where I'm putting my money. This is like the thing that's going to drive my business forward. Like, how are you making those decisions, figuring that out?
Yeah, so two things. I mean, my background is also in customer experience. That's how I got into product. I love building products and experiences that I think the world needs and that people love. So first and foremost, like listening to our customers, hearing what they want, making sure that they are having great, exceptional experiences that you can measure, that you can get good feedback for. You guys know, I'm sure in your businesses too, right? Like it comes down to word of mouth and a good reputation in business. So that's important. And we want to reinvest in terms of what our customers are looking for. So that's new products. It's improving our website experience. It's improving, the offerings that are available to them. That's important. I think some of the, sorry, what was your question about?
All right, so let's say you won these grants, you got $10,000. Like, how do you kind of figure out like what's the best way to deploy it?
Yeah, I think the other piece is pivoting. Again, that's a great skill that you learn in product management, is being really open to getting something small in the market, understanding if the market is receiving that well and buying it, or if you need to pivot. And we've also tried a lot of different versions of this model. I would say the model that I started with the business was not the model that I have now. That's one of the biggest piece of recommendations I would say for entrepreneurs. People can kind of fall in love with the solution and think like everybody wants this, but until the market is telling you that time and again, you might need to pivot and make adjustments. And so we have taken some of that funding for innovation and pivots and trying different things. And then, of course, there's just keeping the lights on. You know, I look at the makeup of the pie chart, right, of our business expenses and try to keep operations and administrative costs where they need to be so that I can fund innovation and then fund back into the business for the core capabilities that we have.
So now you mentioned that, you and your husband made a decision to keep this separate. Is there an emotional toll to that? Do you think just because it's like your baby, right? And people who watch podcasts know that like I live the entrepreneur life, right? My husband is an entrepreneur. I grew up with my parents owning a business. And it is sometimes hard to manage because this is your baby and you have other babies.
Yeah.
And it's that emotional piece of if you felt like you needed more, right? I need some capital, I need something, but you've already kind of committed to that decision to separate it. How do you sort of manage the emotions involved in it all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think a lot of it was the alignment and the onset. Right, this is how this business is going to fit into the rest of our family life and where it will fall in priorities in general. We are not going to move into a smaller home because I want money for the business or, so those were sort of some.
You're not saying, hey, kids, sorry, we can't do dance this week. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there has been some of those sacrifices,
okay.
which has actually been interesting. I think that was really important that we had aligned on that. I think we also set our own kind of milestones for my career, right? Of when the business takes off or doesn't take off, when does that need to happen from our financial planning standpoint in our home? And then when do I need to look at other sources of capital where I can be a contributing income back into the family again, whether that's consulting, part-time things, and other opportunities. So I think that helps us stay in check about the expectation of what this thing can be in a realistic life when you have a family and many kids. I said many kids. That's how it felt this morning.
Listen.
They multiply.
I always tell people like 2 kids is cool. That 3rd kid, that's the one that kind of breaks you where you're like, and we're outnumbered all of the time. We are no longer man on man. We are zone every day. How involved is your husband and your kids sort of in the business? Are they helping you on the weekends or because there's toys involved, are your kids helping choose what sort of things go in the crates? Like, tell me a little bit about their involvement.
So it's funny, as somebody who does not like clutter and got rid of my kids' toys, and now to keep costs low, the storage is in my home in one room. So that's been an interesting, personal thing that I have to kind of deal with. And the kids are generally not allowed in that room, unfortunately, much to their chagrin. They are not
I'm sure they really want to be in that room, right?
They really want to be in the room. But, we've had 1 or 2 issues with a lost missing item for an order that we cannot have happen. So that is, again, a separate thing. I think, listen, my husband and I, we spend a lot of time talking business. We always have. That's sort of like a shared interest we have together. Sometimes he, gets involved and has some opinions. I would say we generally keep things pretty separate. I would say more interesting, actually, I have a lot of advisors, partners, an informal advisory committee to the business. So I have, partners with preschools, with professional organizers, with educators, and that is generally my tribe of people who are in the day-to-day that can help me make interesting strategic decisions.
Ooh, I love that. I love that kind of your own board of directors that are giving you advice. That's awesome. Well, I have a million questions, so I
let it go.
I do. I
just
ahead. Think it's so interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell everybody just a little bit, just so they know as we talk about this, about how does this business function, right? What exactly are you doing? Because you're both like a product and a service together. And how does it work for your client, for your consumer?
Yeah. So we've invested in both our site and our technology as well as the operations and education. Those are sort of our 3 core pillars. The education piece is important. We definitely want, I want to help keep kids off screens. I want to reconnect kids with toys and family and playtime, kind of like we used to do old school. And I think that with this idea of a toy rotation, that actually infuses some new novelty and sparks joy and new ideas in our home. So the way that it works is customers can sign up for a membership on our site, and then they can select 8 toys from a library of more than 500. So we have 500 toys. Some are secondhand, some are brand new, some are actually just to market. We've been working with certain partners who are getting toys just to market, and so that's been fun. So parents can pick those toys, they put them in their digital crate, and they check out. In 2 business days, those toys are delivered to their doorstep. Everything's clean and sanitized. Kids get really excited about unboxing the toys and, getting that new delivery. And then when they've decided they've stopped playing with them, parents can go back on the site and they can swap those toys out for different items. They can swap multiple toys at a time or just 1 or 2. They choose a delivery date, and then we come back and do that cycle again, and they put the crate out on their doorstep.
So they don't have the toys for just a month specifically. It's however long they want to keep them for.
Yeah, that was one of the pivots that I learned. We had tried set month-to-month rentals. It was really tricky for parents as well as us as a business. July, the date of February 13th would come around, and parents are like, "Oh my gosh, it's the worst day that I have to pack up these toys and get them in a crate." So we wanted to remove that point of friction for customers, and for us and for our investors. That basically means subscription revenue recurring, no matter how often parents are swapping and using the service.
Well, plus that probably helps you from a cost standpoint. If you're not shipping every month, if you can ship every 3 months, it's better for you.
Yeah, and we're a delivery service, so we intend to grow locally and through delivery. I think there's been a few models of this where they've tried to go national shipping, and the unit economics just aren't there.
Yeah, makes sense.
What happens if a kid falls in love with a toy and they don't want to give it up? Do you have the ability for somebody to purchase the toy from you?
Yeah, for most of our toys, kids can pick and buy right from the crate. There's an opportunity to do it on the website as well as work with us directly to pick those toys. We also are supporting some secondhand sales in general. There are just some toys that are better to own. So a 100-piece puzzle, we're not going to clean and ship that out to customers, but we do get a lot of donations. Again, our vision is just keep toys out of landfills, make sure that, there is a safe, clean, and sanitary way that families can share toys. That's our goal. So whether that is through our rental business as well as secondhand sales, that's another opportunity as well.
How do you take on the secondhand toys? Are you going to stores, secondhand stores for these? Are you finding them in the marketplace? Are friends and family donate? Because I just think about, right, like I vibe with this concept so much, right? 3 kids, I have 2 girls and a boy. What everybody plays with is vastly different, and I just think about the accumulation, right? The accumulation, and what do you do with these things? And do you throw them out? Like, that's terrible. Do you donate them? Do you ever, like, how are you getting the secondhand stuff? Like, can I just come drop stuff off at your house?
Yeah, same.
Yes.
Same. Yeah,
Yes.
birthdays come around. It's like, oh, here's 20 new toys.
God,
Like,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So initially, I think, our inventory was pretty customer led. So we were working directly with customers to co-create whatever they wanted next. It was basically like Santa Claus would come to your doorstep. I think thankfully now with more exposure, we get a lot of donations. And so we're more than happy to pick those up from people. And that is becoming a core part of our business and aligns very much with our mission and values. I'm sure if you guys have seen, sometimes you get really great high quality toys. You can't even tell that they're technically secondhand.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of our curation process. We do not rent everything. We do not sell everything. There is curation and thought that goes into it as well as inspection. And that is where we're using some little AI magic to take photos of a bag of toys, and then we can quickly index them. We can assess what they are to know what exactly that bag of toys is. And are those toys relevant? Are they modern? So a mix of secondhand as well as some new products. We also work with businesses. So we rent to toy studios as well. And they work with us to curate some of those newer higher end toys that are available to our entire customer base.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. And I think like you mentioned the sort of play studio, that's become, and I missed the boat on that. My kids are too old.
I know.
But it's when you hear about them, or the play cafes, oh my God, genius. You mean I can take my kids somewhere, there's fresh, exciting new toys. I can have a cup of coffee. Everybody's safe. Everybody's having a great time. Because I think that is missing. That is one of the things that's sort of missing in culture right now, is that third space for kids. We have it for adults, but kids, it was lacking. And I like how you're sort of plugging the play part back into some of these activities.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, I think there is so much now more than ever, having come from a field in AI to toys, a very, hands-on experience. I mean, we think a lot about connection and trying to get kids, again, to just do real life experiences, foster these missing gaps in our culture where we don't have this organic time to connect and just be off of screens as parents and as kids.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that's really necessary because we've gone so much in that direction. It's kind of nice to just pull them back. not to sound like an old man yelling at clouds, but like, we used to run out all day and then come back.
Old man.
Yeah, and I would say, I think that that's one of the great things, right? Like, listen, my kids watch TV and they do have video games, but part of the insight that I had is when you bring up the box of toys from the basement, oh my gosh, the most novel experience, right?
Yeah,
and
even if it's like toys they've already had for years.
toys they've already had, and so that's the experience that we want to create. So I can get even my 12-year-old or my 10-year-old who wants to play again and think about toys in a different way. And all of our crates, they also include content based on the toys that you rent that gives parents ideas and ways to play. Because I do think that, unfortunately, I think our brains are maybe a little bit broken with screen time, and we sometimes need those idea sparks about how do I talk to my kids about playing with these toys again? What questions can I ask them to engage in deeper play? And that's our goal, right? Is you don't need hundreds and hundreds of toys. You need just a few and to play more intentionally.
Right. Now, getting a little bit back to the financial part of it. So with a business, how do you make decisions on like, okay, like now I'm going to start paying myself. Now I need to put money back in the business. Have you kind of like thought about like where you are in that phase yet? Or are you kind of like, this is my 5-year plan for that? Or
Yeah, I in general feel that I guess most founders, unless you are maybe a young college student living in a dorm and can eat ramen, most founders should pay themselves. I think you get the best output when you can do that. Right now though, it is about investment, right? And that's the primary goal is investment. I want to invest in the company in things for our customers as well as people that I have on the team. So I don't have full-time employees. I've been pretty scrappy about bringing on contractors or people in part-time capacity, but I do value those relationships a ton and pay where I can, as well as, try to do things around Christmas time like a bonus just because I want to show the appreciation, even if it's not the same as getting a regular paycheck. So not yet taking a full-time salary, but maybe with an investment round. And I have triggers in the business that would are plans based on when those financial milestones are reached to make those decisions.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Especially like that to me determines like where you are in your business a lot. Like a lot of people are like, well, I got to take money out. But it's like, well, your ROI is probably much greater if you just put it in the back of the business in like a productive way versus you just taking out some salary. And even like I'm going to talk against myself here, but like investing in the market, right? So, I think you really need to make that decision for yourself as an entrepreneur. Like, all right, if I can put $5 in the business, am I getting 20 out? Like that's a huge return, and that's something you really need to think about.
Yeah, huge on the ROI. I used to say when I worked in corporate, if you're going to hire somebody, they should 3, 4, 5x your output or sometimes even revenue, right? They should make, especially coming from a startup, right? I should have 3 or 4 departments with a great hire. I should be able to improve that with a revenue return or get investment money. I would say now, I think about it more just, what are those individual decisions am I making? And sometimes those are tests, but I think the goal with the tests is to be as lean and cheap as possible until you know that those ad dollars, for example, would go really far. If you think you're going to spend a lot of Facebook because you throw hundreds of dollars at it, but it's not working, maybe a local partnership is the better use of funds.
Yeah, I think failing fast is usually important, especially in entrepreneurship. Like you got to try everything because not everything's going to work. Like I've definitely paid for some marketing stuff that did go nowhere.
God. Marketing is probably, I feel like, one of the hardest challenges of entrepreneurship because marketing is so specialized and the average consumer does not realize how many different parts of marketing there are, how many different knowledge bases you have to have. It's not just, I'm going to put an ad in the newspaper, right? That's what marketing sort of used to be. It's so complex. And as an entrepreneur, you can be really good at the thing you're doing. But if you're not also really good at marketing, nobody knows about the thing. And I think that that's one of the biggest sort of challenges out there is how do you market in a way that's cost effective, that makes sense for your business, that aligns with the customers that you're trying to curate to come to you. And I think that's something that everybody just thinks like, oh yeah, I put some posts on Facebook or I put some posts on Instagram. Like I'm good. I did my marketing. I can like check it off. And I think they don't realize that there's a reason why this is a whole entire industry in itself.
And I mean, you guys have probably heard this as well, but there's sometimes, a different perspective in the entrepreneurship community, which is marketing dollars should be your last dollars. If you're a product-led company, that thing should take off like a rocket ship and via word of mouth because people can't get enough of it. And then you ignite it with marketing and sales dollars. If you feel like you can pay to play, sometimes that doesn't always work and you get synthetic traction, right? I'm going to pay an influencer. You get this like burst in traffic and sales, but it doesn't actually mean that people will work with your product or will buy your product when there's some friction. I think, entrepreneurship too is a lot about not everything is perfect. It's not a multi-million-dollar company. So a customer has to be really motivated to solve the problem and sometimes pay when there is a little friction up front.
Yeah.
Have you struggled at all with this sort of, I guess, that sort of influencer culture just in general with, first off, most entrepreneurs also think they need to be influencers now. So it's like, I have to be both. And I talk about this in Mortgage World all the time. And we've talked about it on the podcast of like, do I want to sell mortgages or do I want to be famous on the internet? They're not the same thing. Have you, and or like influencers approaching you? Have you had any of that at this point? Like people like, hey, if you want to send me this for free, I'll do some posts for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we do take free influencers if anybody is interested. And we've had some partners that have come to us and we've been selective about that, but they actually have been really synergistic for both businesses. I do think that is, is sort of like the irony of the whole business. And I know other people, particularly in the childcare space, feel this way. I have to talk about my business, but what are my kids doing in the background when I'm recording Instagram reel, right? And I think we've all seen those jokes now. So I think it's a delicate balance. I think about it a lot personally for my family, right? I don't want my kids to see that I'm always having to post or scrolling for ideas or to be on the most trendy content. But consumers are there's an overconsumption problem. We see so much information. It is really hard to get signal through the noise. It's really hard, I think, to get your message out and talk about that. So I think it's pretty tricky.
I would agree with that.
Now, Kim, you said you had a couple questions for us. Was there anything you wanted to ask us today, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I guess, how do you guys advise entrepreneurs? Now that we've already taken the leap, let's not pretend this is a pre-decision.
So don't do it.
What's advice that you have, I think, for financial planning as we go into 2026, as we look about a second year of business? I would say, we're still early on in our revenue and our subscription. So what should I think about maybe for my business as well as, for my family and family planning? I think one other thing is really interesting is, Kelly, our kids are about the same age, but I've got a middle schooler now, right? So college tuition, all of that stuff is more looming than ever before. And that's definitely a thought in the back of my mind as I think about how long do you ride out a dream? How many years? What is your runway in time that you're eating away at your personal financial goals?
Oh, that's a heavy one.
Well, can we?
Yeah.
I think this is a great segue sort of back to, you mentioned the sort of investment in your business, right? That it's sort of counter to what you normally talk about. But I think that is probably one of the biggest answers to this is that investing in a business is similar to investing in anything else, that there's risk associated with it, but how do you determine the return?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a challenge. I think, it's a lot of time is like, what's your like business phase, whatever you're in. And is there something like where's the projections going? Like, are they going up consistently and are they, improving? And if like, hey, if I do this, it's going to, lead to this down the line. That's a little different because I think, when you're early phase of your business, you really want to be leaning into reinvesting it. And then when you get probably middle phases, that's where you probably want to say, okay, well, maybe I could start, taking advantage from the tax standpoint. Like I can set up my own company retirement plan that benefits me. And because I think one of the challenges I see for like more mature businesses is they're like, well, my retirement is the business and I'm just going to sell it. And like, no, it's probably not going to be worth as much as you think it is. There's a big tax implication of that. And if you're not taking anything out of it throughout the process, you're missing an opportunity there because you have control of your own retirement. Like you create your own 401k plan or your own whatever. So it's really about striking that balance and figuring out, I think the big challenges I have is like, okay, when do I reinvest versus when do I take money out? And then, what's my cash flow? Because you might be like most entrepreneurs where, I mean, you're probably subscriptions, you're probably a little bit more consistent than others, but some like we have a huge month and we have nothing for 3 months. And we have another huge month or, we are our busy seasons this summer, we're quiet in the winter or vice versa. So I think really just kind of figuring out what's the cadence of your business is probably one of the most important things you can understand because cash flow is like the main thing that you need to figure out.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I would sort of just say to that too is the sort of concept of the cash flow versus the investment and spending money to make money. And I think like the spending money to make money is probably conceptually sounds really easy, right? Like, oh yeah, but it's spending the money is also getting the help. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I see this, we see like two halves of the same whole all the time, Derek and I, because he sees like the back end financial, but I see the day-to-day ramifications for people of, I have a ton of small business owners. I'm looking at tax returns. I'm looking at business bank accounts because I'm trying to qualify people for mortgages. And I can sort of see you have a huge business, but you're not an S-corp. And have you thought about the tax implications of this? And I think a lot of people wait too long to engage, especially tax professionals more than anybody else, to engage tax professionals. And they miss a lot of money and they miss a lot of advantages because it's too expensive to invest in that from the beginning. And it feels not important. And I think, that to me, when I'm looking at the way things are structured for businesses, it always throws me off. Or people who make these like blanket bucket LLCs and they are dumping multiple revenue streams into it that are maybe related, right? But not exactly the same, or they're related, but they're not using like kind of tax sheltering or harboring correctly. And they're just missing out on money. Everything looks like income. That's not actually income.
That's really interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine as a forever entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, maybe someday. And we were talking about this idea of venture studios, right? I think as people who have many ideas, what does that look like to have sort of a bunch of different businesses under one LLC? So I'll have to come back to you guys for questions on
I would
that.
not recommend having.
No, it's tricky. Nothing's protected.
Well, because that's the challenge. So if you have two businesses, okay, let's say one business is great, it's cash flowing, awesome. The other one's kind of but it's fine. And then something happens at any one of those businesses. Now that person can go after both businesses. So there's no separation there, and that's a really big issue. Even if like you have a rental property, it doesn't make sense to have a business and a rental property in the same LLC.
Yeah, I would say I really find that from especially because people don't realize how. We all know, like, we hate taxes, right? We talk about taxes a lot on this, but like, right, I don't want to pay taxes. But people don't realize, first off, how manipulatable taxes are. That what you're paying in taxes, there is this road you can go down and pay this amount, and then there's 500 other roads that you can go down and pay varying amounts. That every setup has a different benefit, has a different cost to it, and it's getting the right advice to figure out, how do I want to be set up? Because there can be hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake if you are set up one way versus the other. And we talk about mortgages a lot, like what's good for a mortgage is bad for taxes, and what's good for taxes is bad for a mortgage. And that's really about like what you're writing off, right? Because we get people who have very successful businesses who write every single dollar off. And as far as the government's concerned, you make $0, right? You cannot get a mortgage. You can't buy a car. It's very hard to get credit. But you're saving money on taxes, right? Well, what happens when you need capital for your business? You can't get it. So you're really hurting yourself there. So I think kind of just that concept, I find what I see in mid-sized businesses, because that's generally what I'm using, right? People who have very large successful businesses don't need a mortgage. They're mortgaging against themselves. They have their own capital. But those sort of mid-level businesses is, if I see 5 LLCs with one guy with one business, I know that we're going to be beautiful. We're set up correctly. It's when I get like the mid-sized business and I've got one LLC, it's not in an S-corp, it's just chilling and everything's coming into it. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be pretty for me. Because that's like the structure where I'm just going to write everything off. That's how I'm saving money. Where when you see I've got a rental company, a leasing company, my actual company, I've got, real estate holding, I've got all these little buckets. I know that we're being taxed appropriately. That's kind of mine. So make tax professionals so important. I know they're hard to find.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, it's been interesting too in the founder journey. I've taken on some different types of work, and to keep it all simple, I'm like, put it all into the business account, but I think I maybe need to fix some of that stuff. So.
Consulting especially, I feel like, is that's almost the trickiest line item for that is consulting, right? It's usually 1099 work. You are self-employed. Do I want to open a separate LLC for that and a separate business bank account? No, I need that money for my actual business. Why don't we just flow it all in? And you may be missing out on some tax advantages.
Right. That was a great takeaway. Thank you guys.
So what else you got? Anything? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, as business owner yourself, I guess, what is the best thing you guys did for yourself financially? What's one of the best things, and maybe a lesson learned? Because I'll be honest, I think as a founder, I'll give you a minute to think about it. As a founder, I think love the customer experience. I like the tech. I like, talking to partners. You probably hear this from a lot of founders. Don't love looking at the financials. Like that's like I got to do it. I know I do. And I actually, when I figure it out, I feel really empowered to do it. But yeah, so any advice you guys have?
I got it. All right. So I have some business owner clients. And one of the things I always tell them is, what are you doing in your business world that feels really light for you? And what feels heavy? And what is the most productive thing you could do with your time? And what feels like the least productive thing you could do with your time? Because one of the things that I've realized is like, I don't do any paperwork here. I don't do it. I will never do it. I don't call LPL. I don't do any of that stuff because it's not worth my time. I'm not good at it and I don't enjoy it. So I would really write down specifically, like, what can I offload? Like if I'm making whatever, $500 an hour, let's say, what can I hire someone $30 an hour to do? And I think to me, that's the biggest thing you could do for your business. And also like coming up with the systems. And because with that, when you go to sell your business, the thing that business owners don't realize is that if you are the business, your business is worth nothing or it's worth very little. So the more you can get yourself out of the business, let's say you could take a vacation for 3 months, that business is going to be worth a ton more than the business that you have to grind in every single day.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've been talking to a couple of other small business owners as well as founders, and I think it's this really interesting balance. I tend to think about scale a lot because I was in startups that had to scale. So I think about how quickly can I scale a team or outsource a capability. But sometimes I think, am I sacrificing too much of my control or my brand or my vision by outsourcing too early? And so I've had a lot of conversations with, female business owners who maybe have 1 or 2, 3 employees and they're just starting. And I tend to see them take one of either route. It's like scale too fast or like complete control. I want to control everything about my brand, how it works, every customer I talk to. And so we have a lot of interesting discussions about the timing of that.
That's gotta be tough. Cause I mean, at the end of the day though, it's like thinking about, all right, if I did give this up, what would the worst case scenario look like? Would it really hurt the brand as much as I think it would? Because I think a lot of times we're emotional with our own business. Is like, well, no one could possibly do this as well as I can. When, if you find the right person, they could.
I think about that all the time. Yeah. I think that like every decision I make is also, it's time cap for me, right? How much time can I spend on creating this Instagram post? Is it going to make or break a subscription sign up? Probably, then I know how much time I'm spending on it.
Right, exactly.
Well, and that was, so actually you dovetailed. My advice was going to be sort of surrounding that topic of probably the biggest money waster for entrepreneurs is getting lost in the weeds. And again, you guys know I'm on social media a lot, and I do spend a lot of time on social media, but it is so easy to get lost in the weeds on likes and attentions, and that somehow equals dollar signs, and that does not equal dollar signs. And so I think just being really careful to not let that, because you're right, like you could spend 5 hours on one Instagram post, and you feel like this embodies my brand, and so it has to look perfect. But brand is also fluid, and I think people miss that a little bit too, is that there's so much out there in marketing right now that you have to have this brand, and brand is everything, and what your brand looks like and how it presents to the world is the make it or break it for your business. But if you think about, I'm going to pick on it, right? We were joking about my Coca-Cola earlier, the Super Bowl ad with the Pepsi stealing the Coca-Cola bears, Coca-Cola is so big at this point that was funny. It's a joke. It means nothing to them, right? Their brand is the biggest soda brand in the world. Your brand isn't. So it feels heavier. But I think just knowing that you can pivot on brand, you can pivot on look, you can pivot on sort of the social media takeaway for people. And I think even me listening to you talk, I think when I started watching you sort of do this, it didn't feel as much about the sort of consumerism that we have right now, but that's an interesting brand shift. And I think that is huge, that maybe didn't show up in your branding a year ago or 2 years ago. I've seen that transition for you. And I know that in the world, again, especially from who's your target audience, it's probably millennials, right? We are so much more conscientious of that now. We're so much more conscientious of my house is cluttered and full of garbage and it makes me angsty, and is this good for the world that I'm living in? It's not just my own personal backyard. Is this good for the world that I'm living in? And I think being flexible to that brand shift as you watch your clients and consumers respond to things.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I advise some startups too, and we talk a lot about customer discovery and the value proposition, right? And I think when you're just starting out, you don't know. You have a hypothesis, or you have five, and you have five that resonates with five different audiences. So honing in, and I think to your point exactly, like being flexible about what messages are conveying and hitting is really important, and what the brand looked like. I actually have changed the name. I've changed the logo. And I've definitely changed the way that we talk to the market. And the only way that I could do that is by getting out there with it and moving quickly. I think, Derek, one other thing that you were talking about too is how you spend your time is also like, I think that's another slippery slope that I've learned with looking for investment. It can feel really great to have a lot of investment conversations to win some competitions. Sometimes that's required to gain capital, but it can distract you from reinvesting into the business, spending that time. And that's one thing that I would also caution entrepreneurs to have a time cap, to know what the goal is, to how much you want to raise, and be really precise about it, and then move back to building your business, because much like social media, it can be another one of those traps where you like, I've seen some founders who love winning pitch competitions, and I, had the opportunity to do some of that this year, but then at some point in time it said, okay, well now it's time to focus on my customers.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of keeping the main thing. So whatever's the main driver of your business, you need to focus on that more than anything.
I love it. All right. Can you just really quickly kind of tell everybody the ideal client for you, right? Who are you speaking to in this business? Because we want our listeners, if you're interested, we're going to put all of Kim's contact information, the website, everything in the show notes. But who are the people who should be checking you out?
Yep. Love to talk to parents of kids ages 0 to 6. If you've got a baby on the way, another great fit for us. If you are really stressed out about the clutter in the house, feel like you spend more time buying baskets and organizing systems than you do actually playing and connecting with your kids, those are the people who we want to check us out. I would say we've got a good mix of, the products that kids know and love, like Bluey and Elmo and Princess, but also have some of those really great high quality toys if you're more of the Montessori parent that wants lots of the noise and beeps and bops. So parents in Connecticut would love for you guys to check us out.
Awesome. Thank you. And what's your website?
Orbitcrates.com. You can follow us at orbitcrates.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Such a pleasure. And again, we'll put all of Kim's contact information in the show notes. You can check her out and hopefully sign up for a subscription.
Thank you.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance reference is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.